Join UF Hall of Famer and 14-year NFL vet Shane Matthews every weekday as he brings you all you need to know about your Florida Gators, including news, analysis, and opinions with some of the biggest names in sports. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Or watch us live at 8 a.m. on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
Hey guys, Shane here. Just letting y'all know that Grizzly and I, Grizzly, look at the camera. We're going to take this week off. We're getting ready for the grind of football season. As Coach Napier says, submarine season. Seth Harp will host. He'll have all great guests. Y'all make sure y'all tune in, and we'll see you next week. Let's get ready for football season, folks. Go Gators.
Well, happy Thursday to you. Seth Harp, Harp on Sports with you here. PodUp with Matthews in the morning. My cohort in crime today from First Coast News, our college football insider, Mr. Brent Beaird, going to be joining us here in a matter of moments, courtesy of the Titan MRI hotline. Of course, PodUp with Matthews in the morning, coming to you live from the Crime Prevention Security System studios. Large enough to serve you, small enough to care. You got a question for Brent or myself? Fire away, courtesy of the Meldon Law official injury attorney and accident law firm partner Facebook firing squad, if you will. Fire away, whatever you got for us. We'll do our best to answer within reason over the course of the next 60 minutes. Well, Brent, you sent me your notes. We got a lot here to discuss and to analyze. When we were going back and forth last night about what we were going to do today, all of a sudden it breaks. Brent, I think it was Brent McMurphy and then others, I'm trying to think who else came down the line, maybe Andy Staples, that came down the line. Colorado's departure from the Pac-12 imminent, heading to the Big 12, and apparently they want to be Santa Claus and bring Arizona and Arizona State and Utah with them. Brent, what does this do for the fabric of college football west of the Mississippi?
Well, good morning, Seth. This is a situation that we've been talking about now for quite some time, and if people miss this, and it's amazing what you can do on Zoom now, but the Big 12 presidents and chancellors voted unanimously last night on a conference call, probably where a lot of us were sleeping. This was going on. Now, Colorado, the school, must go through the formal steps in order to apply. Now, what the Big 12 is trying to do, this is a little bit comical, frankly, but this is the way it is this needs to appear as it comes from Colorado that they have reached out to the Big 12, and the Big 12 has accepted them in, so that it doesn't look like that the Big 12 has been poaching anyone. So they've got to go through the formalities. Colorado will bring its Board of Regents together either physically or virtually today or tomorrow and make this more official, and we give Pete Thamel some credit certainly for this. That's going on too. Seth, besides a coaching change, is there anything that gets people more excited as far as college football fans than expansion? And the thing we've said always been expansion is never dead, it's only dormant.
Yeah, and this one, it's interesting because what's it been, Brent? Really, when you get right down to it, I mean, you can go back 20 years when Boston College, when I think Miami, and I'm trying to think of who the third team was that joined the ACC. I know when the Big East broke apart, Miami, Boston College, and there was a third one, right, that came along, Virginia Tech. That to me, I know we've always been moving, even going back to the Southwestern Conference. You're right, Brett. Now that I say this, I look back, that happened in the early 90s. A couple years later, you have a couple other things that change. And then all of a sudden, about every 4 or 5 years, right? But about every 4 or 5 years,
Yes.
we have something new. Early 2000s, the ACC shifted. Then you have Nebraska. To me, Nebraska joining the Big Ten was the first big domino because, at least in the quote unquote modern era, because then you had Colorado leave to go to the Pac-12, right? And then Utah joined, and then all what broke loose. I look at it like this. You crunched the numbers and you did the math, and I'm going to let you explain that a little bit more, that making this move is something that can bring Colorado just by moving, not by winning football games, not by, well, the schedule is going to change just because of where it is, not because of hiring a new coach. They're going to make $250 million in the next decade just by changing street addresses.
Well, the amazing thing is Colorado actually is one of the worst teams right now in the Pac-12, one of the worst. And people are almost fighting over Colorado. Now, again, the thing we've got to remember in expansion is these are commissioners who are looking, Seth, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So it's not so much about what Colorado is doing for me right now. It's what are they going to be doing for me a decade from now. And to Seth's point, in the Big 12, Colorado will receive $31 million annually in media rights once the Big 12's new 6-year, $2.3 billion grant of rights with ESPN and Fox begins in 2025. Now in 2024, Colorado will get a full Big 12 revenue share of $42 million. Now, yes, the Big Ten and the SEC per year per school are bigger than this. Yeah. We get that, but there are a lot of tentacles here that are really fascinating. I mean, it's just almost dominoes. Colorado will be leaving the Pac-12. So what does that mean for the Pac-12? Well, there's a bunch of things that's possible. They do not have a TV deal. And Seth Harp, who is one of the best TV people I've ever known, can explain that in a few minutes. But because they don't have a TV deal, Colorado got antsy and decided they better strike while the iron's hot. Now, what this also means is, in the grand scheme of things, in the Pac-12, who do you also want to bring in? Well, the two bigger schools that we've talked about for months are Oregon and Washington. Now, here's the other thing that might happen here. The Big Ten may even look at, we're not saying this is going to happen, they may even look at bringing in Oregon and Washington. No talk from the SEC about this, or at least on the surface, because Oklahoma and Texas are coming in. And again, we've got to remember this year that the Big 12 has already made moves to bring in the 4 teams that they are bringing in this year, including UCF, BYU, Houston, and Cincinnati. So now the Big 12 and Brent Yormark is a very aggressive commissioner who said, Seth, you remember when he said a few months ago, we're open for business? Well, they certainly are. Now, there's some talk, again, Arizona State, Utah, possibly linked with the Big 12. That may have cooled a little bit. Now, believe it or not, what's also been mentioned for the Big 12 are basketball schools, UConn and Gonzaga.
Okay.
Because this is, Seth, as we've talked before, this is not just football, is it? This is commissioners looking at how they can set themselves up there's some streaming stuff I want to get into in a few minutes, but just to give folks a little bit of a broad view, this is quite complicated for the average fan. It's fun to try to follow, but there are many things that have to fall in place before these things get official. But to put it mildly, Seth, if you're a member of the Pac-12 right now, are you going to the medicine cabinet to try to get more tranquilizers?
Yeah, and I went through and I wrote down some notes on this, and I'm gonna throw some questions at you here, Brent, when it comes to the structure of what this could look like if Colorado brings the Arizona schools with them. Brent Beaird, Seth Harp, PodUp with Matthews in the morning. You got a Facebook question? Fire away, courtesy of Meldon Law. Also, PodUp with Matthews in the morning, brought to you in part by Peachland Dental, Gator Nation's #1 choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte and the surrounding areas. Peachland Dentistry. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for JC and the QB's weekend picks. If this Colorado looks like this is imminent, so you made mention Arizona and Arizona State. So if in Utah was the wild card in this, they thought they call it what, the 4 corners that they wanted to bring. If they can't get Utah, which apparently it sounds like there's like a 25% chance they can get them, a 75% chance that they won't get them. So let's say they get these Arizona schools. Now what you've done, if you're the big, you're the Big 12, you lose Texas and you're going to lose Oklahoma. But you've added the Phoenix market by bringing both Arizona schools. Not that you've added the Denver Boulder. You bring Denver in because it's about, you mentioned about TV. It's about media rights and access to big markets. Notre Dame, I keep saying this time and time again. The reason the Big Ten added Rutgers, or why did the Big Ten add Rutgers? Brent, they added them for New York City. That's 11 million people that in New Jersey, they could pump that wattage into those markets and say, look, we've got 11 million new customers. That's why they do it. It's about empire. They're like, conferences are like Alexander the Great. It's about empire, Genghis Khan. It's empire. So now that we have these fancy things called aeroplanes, geography doesn't matter. So I ask you this. If the Big 12, if it's Arizona State, and Colorado, they're talking about, well, Utah, if Utah doesn't go, then that's where I have question marks. Memphis makes sense geographically, but they had a chance at Memphis a couple years ago when they did the BYU and UCF Cincinnati thing, and they chose we'd rather have BYU than Memphis. The one that I don't understand for the life of me, Brent, the hottest city in America when it comes to expansion and growing your leagues is Las Vegas. The NFL moved the Raiders there. Baseball about to move the A's there. They started an expansion hockey team, and Adam Silver, within 5 years, they're going to have an NBA team. Brent, why isn't the Big 12 or somebody tried to sink their teeth into UNLV yet?
Well, that may be just a matter of time, actually, before that happens. And the thing with expansion, often the teams that don't look very attractive right now, in 3 to 5 years, may be extremely attractive at that point. So, and there are so many tentacles to this. Some of them are also, and these are not just football decisions. These are also, obviously, the other sports. It is certainly the TV market, as Seth has talked about. That's extremely important. And again, the people making these decisions are presidents and chancellors. And let's be honest, they think differently than the average football fan does, because they're looking at how much money can be brought in. They're looking at, and look, this is extremely important to these presidents, is the fact of they also want schools that have a very high academic rating. This is why that you've heard the rumors over the last few years that the SEC is so interested in North Carolina and Duke from the ACC, not so much for football only, but also what they could bring to the league academically. And with that reputation they've got, they're members of the prestigious, I believe the acronym is AAU. So we can't forget that either along this line. Now, the other big part of this is, and I want Seth to explain this because he knows television very well. Part of the problem with the Pac-12, if the Pac-12 had a grant of rights deal done with TV partners, this may be very different right now. But they're talking. My understanding is the Pac-12 has had conversations with Apple, Amazon, Turner, Ion, yes, that Ion, with Criminal Minds, etc., and CW, as some of the other conferences have. So, Seth, this is a different day, is it not, with streaming and TV, and these are things that are important to keep in mind, because those the ones that I just mentioned, I think are going to be even more important, 5 and 10 years down the line.
Yeah, and this is what's fascinating to me about this, Brent, is that Pac-12 land, it's Silicon Valley. So you think with Google, right, and all the access platforms out there, Amazon and all,
correct.
You think with all those that it would be just seamless that the Pac-12 could walk down from Palo Alto or Cal, Berkeley, or wherever, Stanford. I mean, walk down and go, hey, gang, let UCLA, USC, when they're there, and hey, let's knock this out. Let's create an app on the Roku. Let's do this where we have our own network, just like Netflix. Let's create a Netflix type network that's $1.99 a month for everybody. You think, and it's funny because I've got the Wham Bam Thank You Ma'am TV package because of all the sports I watch.
Sure.
Brent, I know 6 Western channels before you could tell me where the Pac-12 network is. I know. Yeah. I don't even have kids. My nieces and nephews, when they come and see me, I know where the Cartoon Network is. I don't know where the Pac-12 network is. So it's kind of sad when you think about it that they've had these opportunities. And I know we want to get into some SEC and the ACC Media Day stuff, but to me, if this is true and these schools leave, I'm trying to think what you do if the Pac-12, if you lose Arizona State, you already lose UCLA, Colorado, if you lose Utah, okay, now you're the Pac-6. I wrote down some schools. Brent, you tell me, you covered college football for 40 years. You tell me, does Fresno State, San Diego State, SMU, UNLV, Boise State, does this make this conference still a Power 5?
Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is, a lot of people have said no, it would not. And look, I feel for these players and the fans of what, Seth, Oregon State, and schools like that are just, they desperately want to see a TV deal, grant of rights, and it just hasn't happened. Now, obviously, the Big 12 has got I won't say new, but newer commissioner, Kliavkoff, who I think is doing all he can to try to get this together. The problem is the commissioner has sometimes been slowed down by the presidents and chancellors of the Pac-12, who did not see this years ago as a priority, as the presidents and chancellors have of the SEC and the Big Ten. So, look, I'm not saying Oregon State's coming to the SEC, but the reason that our listeners should be interested in this, or at least give it somewhat of a follow, is, as Sam said earlier, geography no longer is anything to do with expansion, is it, Seth? Yeah. So the truth of the matter is, you never really know who. I mean, we think we know logically who would be the next teams to join the SEC after Texas and Oklahoma come in next year and get settled down. But frankly, we really don't know what could be different again in 3 to 5 to 10 years as we're looking at this. And the thing that probably some of the fans are thinking, well, what's the big deal? What's the hurry about this? Well, the hurry about this is we're about to launch into the expansion of the playoffs, which is going to revolutionize college football as we know it. So, Seth, if you're an official in a conference right now, you're probably working longer hours to get this done before that deadline comes up next year of all this stuff being brand new with expanded playoffs.
It's a money game, and if anybody, I was trying to think about this, and getting ready for the show and last night. And if you haven't seen the movie, watch it, because I think it's the best, analogy to real life, or at least this is Hollywood's version of real life. Watch The Founder with Michael Keaton as Ray Kroc and how he built the McDonald's empire. That's what these conferences are trying to do. They're expansion, grow, more money, revenue, grow. And every now and then I run into somebody that says, well, when did it become about the money? It became about the money when they signed the Declaration of Independence. They didn't want to pay taxes.
Absolutely.
It's always been about money, but now it's about more money. Brent Beaird with us here, courtesy of the Titan MRI Hotline. Seth Harp, PodUp with Matthews in the morning, brought to you in part by Ruse-Olga State Farm Insurance, a team of dedicated insurance professionals ready to help life go in the right direction with the right insurance options for you and your family. Visit ograinsurance.com. Call us 352-240-1779. That's 352-240-1779. Let's see here, Brent, a couple comments. And again, I want to get in. Well, we'll get into the SEC and the ACC on the second half of the show, just because this is such a massive domino when we kind of expected things to not happen, at least alignment wise, until the start of the season. I thought, okay, well, media days are done, and then boom, Colorado may be leaving, Arizona State may be leaving. The SEC right now, they're in pretty good shape. But the Big Ten proved with USC and UCLA that if you're standing pat, you may get picked off. So I look at it this way. Right now, money-wise, because they have bigger markets, I always try to explain this to people, it's because of market sizes. The Big Ten is number one in terms of revenue, in terms of conferences. The SEC's number two. They're 1 and 2. We're closer to the ACC, so familiarity with it. But Brent, if somehow the Pac-12 can land the Big 12, Colorado, Utah, and get both Arizona schools and add the Phoenix and Denver markets, can you start to make a case that power-wise, money-wise, the Big 12 is on par with the ACC? Are we close?
Yeah, you probably could. And again, when we say this, but it's important to remember the ACC grant of rights goes through 2036, which has held the league together, but has also been a tremendous source of frustration for ACC schools, and there are several who would like to leave the ACC. But right now, even though some of these schools in the ACC have looked over that document, they say it's pretty ironclad right now. We've got to be realistic. Gosh, Seth, can you imagine if that grant of rights in the SEC, in the ACC was, say that was going away next year or year after that? How convoluted would this situation in expansion be right now?
Oh my God. They would be trying to pick off SEC schools because to do that is try to do a new TV deal where the money would go up. And I look at it this way. It's hard to see how this works in this day and age. But Brent, you have to look at college institutions like their athletes, and they're invoking their no trade clause, and they're invoking trade clauses, and they're asking to be traded. And colleges now, Brent, are free agents.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, that's a really good analogy. Now, we also need to mention if Colorado makes this decision, which as Seth said, and I agree, it looks like it's imminent. It will not happen in 23. It will happen in 24. So that there will be a lot that will give them time to get a lot of this done and make it official and go through all the hoops that they need in order to do that. But again, what we're going to see is this move will start. And I'm not saying we're going to have 5 schools move in the next 3 weeks. I don't think that's going to happen. It will settle down a little bit, but it will let us know kind of where we are, and you can look at some of this stuff logically and be able to figure out what might happen next.
Really quick here, and Ryan Day said something yesterday I want to ask you about, Brent, on the backside of this. John writing in, he said, I heard the SEC is interested in North Carolina schools and Virginia schools. They don't have markets in those states. He's right. John's right, Brent? Because people thought, the SEC should add Florida State and Clemson. It's like, we already got South Carolina and Florida. We don't need those 2 schools. Virginia can give us Washington, D.C. and Baltimore.
Right.
And NC State can give us Raleigh and Charlotte. So that guys, if you can find a big school next to a big city, there you go, that you currently don't have your teeth in. And again, that's what the Big Ten added. When the Big Ten went with Rutgers, they did that so they get their hands on New York City. When they went with Maryland, they did it so they can get their hands on Baltimore. That's why they did it.
Yeah, and again, let me repeat. Yeah. What's also very important there is that SEC presidents cherish the academic standing that a Virginia, North Carolina, and Duke would have. So that is a big part of this too that we don't talk about enough.
Brent, I'm full board. Get both Mississippi schools. They don't add us much. I know that's near and dear to your heart a little bit because they're your next door neighbor there for a while. My next door neighbor.
Yes.
It wouldn't, Brent. I know. I've been in the South for 16 years now, but it wouldn't break this now Southern man's heart to see the Mississippi school goes and Duke and North Carolina added to the SEC. But okay.
Well,
I know that's blasphemy in some areas.
Yeah, and anything can happen here, and people. I'm sure there are probably people listening to us thinking, that this is just sheer lunacy. Are these conferences going to be going to have 20 schools in there in a few years? Well, the answer to that is yes.
Yes. Yeah.
That eventually is what's going to happen, and we're going to have bigger conferences with more teams. To Sam's point a few minutes ago, and we may very well see some of these other conferences, i.e. the Pac-12, if this continues, that there will no longer be a Pac-12 and the remaining schools will be absorbed into something else. And I know this is just hard to imagine where all this is going, and it's hard to say right now. Some of these conferences, they could have a resurgence. We don't know. But Seth, it's pretty easy to see some of that coming, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one thing that is going. People that hate change, it's constant. Evolution, it's constant, man. I didn't have gray hair 3 years ago. Guess what? Let's see. Brought to you in part by Silverback Concrete, a family-led team of heavy concrete specialists that build commercial structures with unrivaled quality. Silverback Concrete, you stand on it, we stand by it. Brent and I are going to come back. I know he's going to do a little bit of the second half show, and then he's got to exit out of here. Ryan Day made some comments about Michigan and Ohio State. And then we still have SEC Media Days and a lot of other things to dive into. We continue on. Brent Beaird, Seth Harp, here on this Thursday edition of PodUp with Matthews in the Morning.
We want to take this moment to thank our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. Our premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Meldon Law, the only official injury and accident law attorneys of the Florida Gators. Peaceland Dental, Gator Nation's first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. Campus USA Credit Union. QC Kinetics, live pain-free with QC Kinetics. Dave & Buster's, eat, drink, play, and watch. Our gridiron sponsors are Auto ER, UF Bookstores, Celebration Point Town Center, Silverback Concrete Co., Ruse Ogre State Farm Insurance, Doreen Wibby, Realtor Caldwell Banker MM Parish. Our touchdown sponsors are Adams Ribs, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Gator Bait Media, Okido America, Style Cuts, Ironwood Golf Course, Big Mills Cheesesteak, McDonald's of Gainesville, 84 Lumber, Aver and Smith, Dowling Signs, Baker's Sporting Goods, Silver Q Billiards and Sports Bar. If you're interested in promoting your business on the show, call Freddie at 352-284-3733. If you like what we're doing here, make sure to follow us and support the businesses that support us.
Hi there, this is head ball coach Steve Spurrier, and I'm here with my wife Jerry and our good friend Sherry Houston, the executive director of the Ronald McDonald House Charities of North Central Florida. We're thrilled to announce that the 2-year anniversary of our restaurant, Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, is coming up on August 14th. Last year we had so much fun celebrating with everybody that we're doing it bigger and better this year. We're hosting a special dinner and celebration that will include a chef's choice of premium buffet or your favorite Spurrier Gridiron Grill menu, including a filet mignon carving station, shrimp and grits, short rib risotto, wonderful seafood options, and many dessert options also.
Like my famous chocolate chip cookies.
Proceeds being donated to the local Ronald McDonald House.
Thrilled to once again partner with Coach Jerry and the Spurrier Gridiron team to raise funds for the Ronald McDonald House, benefiting families and children experiencing medical emergencies.
Spurrier's Gridiron Grill will be donating 11% of all of our money from food and 66% of drink sales to the Ronald McDonald House.
Go to spurriers.com right now and reserve a ticket before they sell out.
We'll have wonderful food, special guests, and a limited edition of the 2nd year anniversary collector's coins, as well as prizes like a dinner with me and Jerry. We couldn't have become one of the busiest and most successful restaurants in the Southeast without your support. So we want to celebrate with the most important people of our team, and that's you.
I want to celebrate with some of those cookies. Do you have any of those?
Sure do. Right here for you.
Oh, thank you.
What a Thursday edition. Seth Harp in for Shane Matthews. PodUp with Matthews in the morning. Brent Beaird with us here at the second half of the show as we continue to journey on. Of course, the big news of the day, Colorado's move from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 imminent. Could be bringing Arizona and Arizona State with them, possibly Utah. It does have a domino effect because if the Pac-12 is open for business in terms of taking our entities, the Big Ten could pounce on Oregon, Washington. Does that then make the SEC go, okay, they're at 18. We need to get to 18. We had Duke, North Carolina. So this is a gigantic domino in terms of what it'll mean for the rest of college football and college sports in general. Again, PodUp with Matthews in the morning here on this Thursday, brought to you in part by Campus USA. Campus USA Credit Union. Put some star power to work in your financial life with Campus USA Credit Union. Brent, this is what Ryan Day had to say at Big Ten Media Days. Something I didn't even think of, but it makes sense. The one thing about college football, not more so than any other sport, but it really is, it's built on tradition. It's built on rivalries. And what I find fascinating about it is it's the sport that the fans want change the most. They want an expanded football playoff. They want better conference games at home. They want to play this team more, even if it means losing this team. So it's one of these things that's constantly changing, but it's built on its tradition and its rivalries. Ryan Day made mention, right, the Big Ten going to do away with divisions, just like the SEC doing away with divisions, the ACC, so you could have the top 2 teams in each conference. Ryan Day basically, without saying it, said, look, we know that Michigan and we're the 2 best teams in the conference. We don't want to play back-to-back anymore. So, or not that they've done it, but we don't want to play back-to-back in the future, I should say. Basically saying, Ohio State, Michigan, we may explore moving this game because I saw a crazy stat, Brent, and somehow I'll write this down. Like 6 times in the last 18 years, Ohio State, Michigan, they'd have played it back-to-back. Those 2 teams would have met for the championship.
Yes.
This not only applies to the Big Ten, right? Auburn, Alabama. 5 times in the last 16 years. The Iron Bowl, where they'd have played it, Brent, then the next week they'd have played it again in the SEC championship game. Is this the next casualty of realignment and changing, that rivalries at the end of the year, the big ones, Michigan, Ohio State, Auburn, Alabama, may have to be moved to avoid back-to-back games?
Well, that's going to be fascinating to see. Michigan's dominated the series as of late, and people are saying, well, is he avoiding the rivalry? I don't know if that's necessarily happening, but, and oh, by the way, this year the ACC is already, will be, or Labor Day weekend or something like that. I mean, the interest, I think, would be there. It would be very different. It would take a lot of getting used to if that's what they decide to do. I don't see that happening unless circumstances just kind of force this on us. And a lot of people have criticized Dave for what he said, is he tired of getting beat? He just don't want to play him. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but it really does make you wonder that, again, 2, 5, 10 years down the road, will some of these rivalries change a bit? And now think about this, Seth. Alabama and Auburn, what if they had played the week following Kick 6?
I know.
What in the world would the buildup have been for that?
I think they would have that year, right? Didn't that end
Yeah.
up Auburn in Missouri, didn't it? Is what
Yeah.
it ended up being? Yeah, Alabama would have been. Yeah, those two teams would have played again. That's one of those years that they would turn right, and then Alabama beats them by 3 touchdowns, and then Kick 6 just becomes a footnote.
Yeah. So, and again, we're not saying this is going to happen, but Ryan Day, it was brought up. He made that discussion. And look, coaches, I guess, always have an agenda one way or another, maybe trying to plant the seed. But Seth's point overall is a really good one. Without divisions, are we going to see, and Seth, don't think for a minute that TV is not going to have a hand in this. And if you're TV, or do you want to see a rematch in the conference championship game of the game of the year the previous week? That to me, TV's end of that is going to be as interesting as anything else.
I just think it's one of these things that, hey, have about 3 or 4 years in a row where Ohio State and Michigan play and then turn around and have to play each other again. And the loser of the first game then wins the second one, and then they'll change. I see what he's seeing. I see what he sees. And it's dominoes, dominoes, dominoes. Let's see here. I know we had you sent me a bunch of notes on things that were going on. Greg Sankey made mention in here, talking about a little bit about what Congress is up to, saying that, if states will not enforce the laws and states are going to prohibit the NCAA or conferences from enforcing these reasonable policies, congressional action is then the only way to provide a national uniform standard. Brent, and the thing about it is, when Congress gets involved with things, they usually get it done. Steroids in baseball, concussions in the NFL. Everybody wants the government to stay out of business until they need government to help their business. But one of the things that I saw this Manchin in Tuberville law, they want to prohibit states from paying players. They want to go down this path. In a state like California, Brent, aren't we headed for another lawsuit, Supreme Court thing? Because if they get this done, a state like California is we're going to pay them. So what? What are you going to do? And isn't it going to be tough for Congress if they create these NIL rules, right? Isn't it going to be tough to fly that up the ladder to the Supreme Court and tell a state you can't pay the athletes for playing football? Isn't that going to be tough?
Sure it is. No question. Now, in the Tuberville Manchin bill, another part of that was that there was a difference in they were trying to do something to the transfer portal. And what they said was something similar to, you can't transfer until you're in your, maybe like your third year, and if you transfer, you have to sit out. Well, that would basically be going back to what we had before. I don't see that happening, and they may have to amend the bill. Now, here, Seth, here's where we're headed to, and Nick Saban has alluded to this too. Saban has said, well, if we're going to this pro model, what we're going to end up doing eventually is having contracts between players and schools, and we're going to end up having revenue sharing. Well, that's the big thing that's coming up, is ironing something out where the players really do get a piece of the TV deal. Now, all this is so complicated, and it's hard to say where this is going. But Sankey really, instead of the commissioners, instead of the conferences, he really wants Congress to do something about this. And I think what you said is what he alluded to, was they can probably get it done quicker than anyone else. But also, to your point, the legal arguments that you're going to have to some of these things are going to send us back to kind of where we were when the Supreme Court said, after 9-0, and dealt a real blow to this amateur model. So this is something that we've really got to look at closely. But Seth, I know they want to keep this amateur status, and they don't want players to be considered employees. And I don't know how you phrase that with the legalities of it, but I do think eventually, if we keep going down the road we're going down, that, as Saban said, we're probably going to end up with contracts and sharing of the TV revenue if this path keeps going the way it is.
It's one of these things that I think this is where we are. Brent, unfortunately, the NCAA is just kind of like a bystander now in this. Once they lost that Supreme Court case,
yes.
The NCAA, they're weak. Yeah, well, you've been chipping away at them for a decade. It's like taking a police officer and taking away his firearm, his car, his baton, his ability to you, and then saying, go catch the criminal. Okay, good luck with that. So I look at it this way. The structure of this, it's almost impossible now. The school's going to make a decision. There's a way to keep guys from transferring, at least at the rate they're transferring and entering the portal. You have to make them employees and make them sign contracts.
Yeah.
You either give up money to keep them in town, or you don't, and they're going to leave. You have to make a decision. You're going to pay to keep them around is essentially what you no longer, Brent, are the days that, well, we don't want to give you revenue. We don't want to share. You're not an employee, but you have to stay. Those days are done.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and especially with the money that we're seeing involved with these media rights deals and where that's going. And look, I don't want to, and I don't necessarily know if it's a good thing for college football to become a minor league of the NFL or become NFL light. I'm not so much looking at that, because I do think when we start playing games and we get the teams on the field, that still saves the day to a point. But Seth, we're and look, in one way or another, the expansion, employee contracts, and so forth, all this stuff is intertwined, right? Somewhere in another. And Seth, the changes that we have seen in college football, the last 5 years, or more than we've seen in probably the previous 30.
Yeah. Northwestern's on the bottom tier rung in terms of revenue producing schools in the Big Ten. Academic standards are great. And they're about ready to build an $800 million stadium, Brent.
Oh yeah.
No
Oh
public
yeah.
funding. We're just gonna
Absolutely.
build it. We got so much money, we're just gonna build it. All right, man. I know you've got to get running. I've got one more question for you before you go, if that's okay.
Sure.
Have you ever been a part of an SEC media day where the two teams picked to get to the championship game and the team picked to win it did not have a quarterback on the first, second, third, or honorable mention?
No. That really was amazing that Alabama and Georgia are picked, and we don't know who the quarterback's going to be for either one of them. Now, we do think Carson Beck probably is going to be the quarterback at Georgia, the kid from Jacksonville at Mandarin High School. We really don't know who the Alabama quarterback's going to be. I do think it's probably going to be Ty Simpson eventually, but that's a fascinating point, isn't it, Seth? But it also shows you how good both teams' rosters are, how good the coaching staffs are, that you can still put them up there. And again, the most amazing thing is that you had eight people who voted that Vanderbilt would win the East and would win the SEC, which was one of the more amazing things that I've ever seen. But again, I mean, Seth, by the time this segment comes up next Thursday, pretty much a lot of the teams are going to be on the field, and fall camp's going to be started. So it's just amazing what's going on right now.
Time flies, and ready for this, Brent? 5 weeks from tonight, Florida and Utah kick off. Just 35.
Incredible.
I know you got to get running. Hey, thanks. And I, as always, appreciate it. We need to do this more often. And Brent, can't thank you enough for hopping on today.
Glad to do it, Seth. Always. If folks don't know, Seth and I have worked together for years at various stations and so forth. And Seth is one of the best, folks. I can tell you that. And Seth, my friend, it's always good to work with you.
And Brent, college football expansion as we continue conference realignment. Welcome to the Wild Wild West, my friend.
Absolutely. It'll be fun to watch, won't it?
There we go. Brent Beaird with us here on PodUp with Matthews in the morning. I got my cowboy hat. And but the SEC and Big Ten are still king when it comes to, I know, terrible. Fun. There we go. Got to thank Brent for stopping by. PodUp with Matthews in the morning, of course. PodUp with Matthews in the morning. A service of, make sure I get all my good stuff in here. QC Kinetics. You got joint pain in your shoulders, knee, hip, or back. Check out QC Kinetics. Long-lasting relief, no surgery, drugs, or downtime. Schedule your free consultation. QC Kinetics with locations in Ocala, now open in Gainesville as well. 352-400-4550. 352. Let me read some comments. 400-4550. Dan says, just like D out of his hat. Yeah, that's where it came from. I think I look more like Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle, remember that? The segment on Chappelle's show? So there you go. John writes in, how long before the players get a piece of that media rights deal? Yeah. Look, this is one of these things now where we are. Just a matter of time before, you know how you see those ads on TV for like, do you think that Roundup may have caused you cancer? Give us a call. Boom, class action lawsuit. Do you think this drug caused your impotence? Call us. Be part of our class action lawsuit. You see it all the time for various different things. Camp Lejeune. You hear it and you see it. It's just a matter of time before attorneys get together and go, hey, let's sue the you-know-what out of these people. They're billion-dollar printing machines. And let's sue them on behalf of the athletes, saying that they don't let them have an opportunity to earn a fair wage or a fair living, and let's go get them. It's just a matter of time. This is one of these things that a school's eventually going to do it, a state's eventually going to do it, and that's why Joe Manchin and Tommy Tuberville trying to get this bill through Congress. You can try. You may be able to get it through. I don't know if you're going to be able to get it through the House and the Senate. And then I don't even know if President Biden would sign it. But the thing that's the issue with this is that you're trying, no state, it's like Congress shall create no law to, limit free speech. It's very similar where no state's allowed to pay their college athletes. No state's allowed to create a law. It's like, You start doing stuff like that, and someone's going to fly that up the Supreme Court ladder, and the Supreme Court's going to say, Supreme Court is adamant about things like this, that you can't restrict people's money. You can't say who can be paid and who can't. That's a lost cause. It is. You just have to accept, if you want control, and this is about control. This is about control. I think the bill from Manchin and Tuberville, shameless. And with all due respect, I don't need Tommy Tuberville lecturing anyone about the right thing to do. Since that dude was at a recruiting dinner, took a phone call, got up, left his job. Was that the Texas Tech Cincinnati fiasco? Tommy Tuberville was at a dinner with a recruit, got a phone call, got offered another job, left the dinner, didn't even come back and talk to the recruit. Left the dinner and went and took the job. I don't need Tommy Tuberville lecturing you or me or anybody on the right thing to do. I don't. Not for 1 second. Sorry, T squared. Good gracious. Tommy Tuberville also, the only coach I've seen this happen, when I was in Alabama covering Auburn, Alabama, Tommy Tuberville's, Auburn had beat Alabama. It was Saban's first year. At the end, Tommy Tuberville had his family come into the press conference and they clapped for him after he finished. It's a true story. Only time I ever saw that. PodUp with Matthews in the morning with you here on this Friday. Tomorrow's show, JC going to be back on. Also, Zach Blobner, WDAE, a sports talk show host, former Florida Gator. I want to bring Zach on to talk about Kyle Trask as the Bucs get ready to open up camp, and how does this quarterback competition going to look? I really want to talk with Zach about this because they're the home of the Bucs. He's part of that, and with Kyle Trask and training camp, how many quarterback violations? How many quarterback battles do we really have? I mean, we know that it's just a matter of time before Anthony Richardson takes the reins from Minshew. We know. Do we really have one with Bryce Young and with the Texans and Davis Mills? I don't think so. All right, so Carolina, we don't have one, do we? That's where I was going with. We don't, but we may really have one in Tampa, a good old-fashioned. Back and forth. Can Trask beat him out? And even if he does beat him out, is there enough weaponry and things there that, let's say Trask and Mayfield back and forth and it doesn't really work out, or both don't, Trask doesn't pop? Does that mean the Bucs are at the top of the Caleb Williams sweepstakes? We'll see. And look, there's guys that have sat out for multiple years before getting their shot that had success. Mahomes sat an entire year. A little bit different situation. Tony Romo sat. He's a third-string quarterback. Finally got his shot. And it's not exactly the same, but Kyle Trask's progression, if he gets the starting job, not the same, because we don't know what his career is going to be, but Romo sat in a similar fashion. Jason Garrett with the Cowboys sat there in a similar fashion. When he got a shot, he was successful. Bryce Young named the starter already. Yeah. See, that's just it. There's no real other competition, with the exception maybe of Tampa. So there we go. So Zach Blobner is going to be on tomorrow to talk about that, WDAE, and of course JC as well. We didn't even really talk about it, and because the Colorado, the big conference dominoes in college football, because that's 99% of the story. But the Angels pulling Shohei Ohtani off the market, and doubling down and going for it, making some big trades with the White Sox. Good for them. Good for the Angels. Now, it breaks my heart for Rays fans, because this is one of those things like she'd have gone out with me if I'd asked her. Sure she would have. Did Tuberville go to Auburn in the middle of the night from Ole Miss? Tommy did a couple things. Again, if you haven't read it yet, USA Today has a great article on this Manchin Tuberville plan for college football. It's nothing except squeezing college athletes, restricting their rights to transfer, putting more money in the college pockets, and saying, this is for the best of the game. Doesn't make sense. It looks like you guys are big fans of Tuberville. But anyway, we got to wrap this thing up. I can't thank Brent Beaird enough for swinging by and being a part of this show. Again, fallout's going to happen all day long. Colorado's move from the Pac-12 to the Big 12 imminent. They are trying to bring with them Arizona and Arizona State. Yeah, and they're trying to get Utah. Don't know if they can get Utah. If Utah doesn't come, Memphis, SMU,